Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hi, I'm Rose Davidson from Talking with the Experts. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Global Glamping Charities for their valued support. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org.
Talking with the Experts.
Michele Thomson discusses the 5 simple strategies to create workplaces that people never want to leave in episode 473.
Get out and to be where your people are. People can't get to like, know, and trust someone that they never see and that they never get to engage with. And that's true for other relationships we have in our personal life. If we're not making efforts to engage with people in new and different ways, then they won't feel that they really know you and not always sure how you're going to react. So the barometer I always say to leaders that I work with is, if you walk in a room full of people that you're supporting or who report to you in the workplace and they look horrified to see you, there's a good chance you're doing something wrong. They should look excited to see you, because when they know that you're entering their room, you're there to support and encourage. You're there to show up with some humility and ask questions for no other reason, other than you're just curious to know how they're doing and you want to support them.
Talking with the Experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. Today, my guest is Michele Thomson, and we're going to be discussing 5 simple strategies to create workplaces that people never want to leave. Now, Michele is a registered nurse. She turned a workplace culture and leadership development coach and consultant who believes that leadership is an exchange of energy between 2 people. She helps leaders and organisations who are ready to challenge the status quo to create psychologically safe workplaces that people never want to leave. Welcome, Michele. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Rose. I'm really excited to be here.
So tell me, Michele, how did you go from being a registered nurse to a development coach?
Yeah. When I tell the story, it makes more sense. But when you say it that way, there doesn't seem to be any sort of connection at all. I think I've said before, I have the gift of gab, so I'll try my best to keep it really short. But I started my consulting business in 2017 because I had been approached by a group of physicians to create and then deliver curriculum for them. And my husband, who has his own business and is the entrepreneur in the family, really said to me, like, you have to start your own business, because I'm a nurse at heart. And I always thought that this would just be a side hustle and I, would never really do anything with it. So that's how the business got started. But when I first started the business, I really thought I would be doing exactly that work. I would be maybe developing curriculum and then, delivering it, that I would potentially be creating policies and procedures, because in the healthcare space, that's typically what consultant work looks like. And I realized really quickly that as much as I loved the client that I was working with, I didn't love the work. And I think in terms of being like doing that full time, and that really shocked me, because I love to teach. I love the experience of teaching, of facilitating, but I also love the experience of learning from the participants and that exchange. And so I was very shocked by that. And I thought, well, gosh, if I'm going to start this business and this is going to be kind of a retirement project, I got to love the work. So I went back, we've all heard of Simon Sinek and like figure out what your why is. So I had to kind of go back into the vault and figure out what it was. And I kept coming back to a story that happened very early in my career. And it wasn't a story that I'd forgotten about, but I think that I had kind of tucked away to protect myself a little bit. And that story was that I had moved across country. I live in Canada to start a job working for an organization that I was very excited about. And presumably I would be running a long-term care home that I was told was running very well. And for the first few months, I thought that was true as well. And then I arrived to work one day to find out that a licensing inspector was coming in to investigate the home, which here in Canada is not unusual. Sometimes they come just to check to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I was quickly told that that wasn't the nature of the visit, that they were actually coming to investigate me because one of our own had accused me of covering up the death of a resident.
Oh.
And it was really in that moment that I realized that I had no idea to lead a group of people who would put, me in that situation, because it really, my ego did step forward. And this was like, how could you do this to me? I've just been struggling for months trying to create a better workplace. And why would you do this? And then I panicked. And it wasn't because I knew it was true. It was because I knew it wasn't true. But I'd only been working there for a few months. I didn't know whether senior leadership would support me. And I was horrified to think that they might actually think it was true. And so after 2 full days of an investigation, of course, it was determined that it was not true. And when the individual was approached, they said, well, we thought we like her, but we thought if we could get her fired, everything would go back to the way that it was. And so, I had enough insight at that point to know that that was a learned behavior. And so I also then very soon after learned that I was about the 6th or 7th general manager of 6 or 7 in as many years. And so this really was a situation where I think all of the people who were working there felt like, I'm just in this for myself. She's not going to stick around for very long. So we're just going to kind of get this over with quickly and go back to the way things were. And I knew that I could either quit my job and not have a hard time finding another job, or I could really, sink my teeth into this experience and try to figure this out. And because I'm a Leo and incredibly stubborn, I decided to do the latter of those. And so I was also very fortunate that I had some mentors that would support me and definitely had my back in that organization and helped me. But it was a lot of trial and error. And I would say far more error than successes at the beginning. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really incredible story. And it's difficult when people make up stories about you and you only find out when someone's coming to investigate you. That's terrible, honestly.
Yeah, it seems like quite atrocious behavior, but here's the thing where I think the connection happens is over 25 years I've been doing this now, and you learn about, I think, more about human nature, and for me, I think leadership has gotten a bad rap. I really do. Like, I think that it's seen as this really dry subject that happens only in spaces that are very formalized in the workplace. But really, for me, leadership is about how we show up in the world, how we walk through life. We're leaders in all aspects of our life. And I believe, for me, the definition is really that it's just an exchange of energy. And so what I know now is that we're actually more hardwired to connect than we are different. And, I think that when people don't feel safe at work, they behave badly. I truly don't believe that the majority of people get up and go to work every day with the intention of not doing a good job. And I kind of think of it as, if you have a small child and they throw a temper tantrum, often, that can be really frustrating as a parent. But when we really think about why is it happening, it's often because the child is tired. They are in it. They feel, maybe unsafe about something. They're in a new environment. They're experiencing something new for the first time. That's just a fear factor. And so I don't think that adults are really any different. When things are changing, that's scary. And often people will behave quite badly. So, for me, I think the skill of leadership, because it is a skill and we don't often get taught how to do it, is really understanding the pieces around human connection. And I think that once you learn that, leadership is actually quite easy. And you can do small things to make huge shifts in the workplace.
Yeah, I can agree. I can agree with that because I've worked in organizations where a small change can be or can feel catastrophic to those under you, as it were, at the workplace. And I often used change management practices to, just to make the smallest changes, because it can be difficult for some, especially if they've been in the organisation for a number of years and they see this change as a threat to their position.
Yeah, and I find a lot of organizations also decide to make changes when there's the least amount of stability. Like we're changing because of something, or we're pivoting because of something. And so people are often already kind of in a state of feeling, there's disarray or confusion, and they're not really exactly sure of the path forward. And so, when I work with organizations, or when I've implemented a change project in an organization where I've worked, I always make sure that whatever direct environment is going to be going through the greatest deal of change, that people already feel that there's a sense of stability. And we've been talking about what this change is going to look like for weeks, in some cases months, before any change even happens, that there's been a lot of open dialogue around that. And while it doesn't necessarily fix all of the problems or struggles, you're always going to get a few people who are going to dig their heels in or kind of go kicking and screaming. That's just part of human nature. But I think for the most part, when you can do some of those pieces in advance and really help people feel not just physically safe, but psychologically safe, change is far less, scary.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I think, you've got to consult with all the stakeholders within the organisation that are going to be affected by this change, and even the ones that may be outside, because they maybe have stakeholders outside of their department or area. And so, everyone needs to be consulted in one way or another, so that when the change does happen, everyone's on the same boat.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, what are some simple daily strategies that can simplify the leadership challenge, I guess?
Yeah, well, I always share that I have 5, and recently I've added an extra one. So now I have 6. So there's going to be a bonus one today that I'm going to throw in, just because there's one that's been coming up in some of the teaching that I've been doing. And I thought it really, it needs to be there. So, I think that the first one that I always tell everybody, and I'm going to speak about it, leadership in terms of in the workplace, but these are things that I do every day. I do them when I'm at work and when I'm out of work. So the first one I tell people is to get out of your office every day. And so that's pretty self-explanatory here in the office. If you want to develop trust and you want to, have people feel safe, the best and easiest way to do that is to get out and to be where your people are. People can't get to know, and trust someone that they never see and that they never get to engage with. And that's true for other relationships we have in our personal life. If we're not making efforts to engage with people in new and different ways, then they won't feel that they really know you, and not always sure how you're going to react. So the barometer I always say to leaders that I work with is, if you walk in a room full of people that you're supporting or who report to you in the workplace, and they look horrified to see you, there's a good chance you're doing something wrong. They should look excited to see you, because when they know that you're entering their room, you're there to support and encourage. You're there to show up with some humility and ask questions for no other reason, other than you're just curious to know how they're doing and you want to support them. You're there to offer feedback if asked, but you're not being intrusive to just give it if nobody asks you for it. And so, that's the first one. I think the second one for me would be to try to avoid using one of the words I just did, which is but, should, and try. And that seems like maybe people don't think that that's really important. I really believe that the words that we use have a lot of power in terms of how they resonate and land with other people. And so, but when you look at how but is used in the English language, it's usually used as a stringing word, like how we use and. It's to string more than one thought or sentence together. And so an example might be, I really liked that report that you wrote, but it was missing a section that I thought could have been there. So what happens is that it negates the positive part that you said at the beginning of that sentence, that I really liked the report. All that person walks away with is hearing the part that wasn't so great. So my recommendation is either just to put a period and not the but, And it can be more of that yes and idea. So I really liked that report you wrote. And I think there was a section that could have had more information. Let's talk about that. So it's not a but a yes and. The word should, I've heard this all over the place. Don't let people should all over you. Right. And I think that that's really getting to the crux of the word should, is that it really kind of puts this perception of judgment on somebody, like you should have done that, or I should have even done that. I think sometimes our own internal critic can be worse, far worse than people that we engage with. And so when we're shoulding all the time, that really comes from a place of not really looking at decisions that we're making always in the most positive light. And it starts to get us to be in a framework where we're questioning decision making. And I think that, it's just part of that negative self-talk that we hear about. And then the word try, when you use the word try, it kind of implies that, well, I'll try. It's sort of like I'm saying it, but I'm not really going to make much of an effort to see if I can be successful. And so I think that try works really well when it's something that, is a stretch. Maybe it's a stretch goal. Like, I'll try running a marathon in the next month. That might not happen. But when you say, well, I'll try to do that report for you by tomorrow, the chances are pretty low it's going to get done because you're probably not going to try that hard. So just to remove that word altogether. And then I think that, another one is the if only game. And this was like the sixth one that I said, is that a lot of people that I work with, they play this if only game. So if only I had more time, if only I had more energy, if only, my kids would put the dishes in the dishwasher after they eat. There's this constant sense of scarcity that you're chasing something down. And I think that when you live in a mindset of the if only, it really doesn't allow you to be expansive and to feel creative. It's quite exhausting. And it's really you're just trying to get from task to task to task. So if you can try to stop playing the if only game with yourself, and sometimes that's really just allowing yourself to have the humility of meeting yourself where you're at, using words like, I'm doing the best I can with what I have right now, and that's enough. Great job. I try to find one thing that I can do nice for myself, and that's another one. So one of the other ones is just approach almost every situation with a growth mindset. People have either fixed or growth mindsets. The fixed mindset is where we believe that it is what it is just because that's the way that it is, and there's no opportunity to change. And people with growth mindsets believe that things are moving and they're fluid, and there's opportunity to improve or to develop a skill where you can acquire something. So I think that when you look at it from that lens, and this is particularly true, I think, for people who maybe have a hard time with people pleasing or perfectionism, and sometimes then they'll procrastinate because they're so worried that they're not going to get it right the first time. They just don't do anything. Yeah, I am one of those people to the core. And that's why I feel comfortable saying this, because it's sort of a me too. Like, we all have those aspects of ourselves in those traits, and we can all generally relate in one way or another. And so I think that, when you can look at it from that perspective, it helps to take the criticism out of it. One of the other ones that I suggest is to listen to others with humility and the curiosity, and recognize that it's an opportunity to learn when you are engaging with people that have lived experiences different than your own. I believe that humility really is just an acceptance that you have more to learn. It's simple. So I think that when you can listen with genuine curiosity and interest and with respect, it can often take a lot of the fear away from people when they want to sit down and have really challenging conversations, or those where maybe they're afraid to ask questions that might offend someone. And we see this a lot when we talk about like DEI spaces around diversity and equity and inclusion. We're so afraid sometimes to ask questions that we don't ask them at all. And then that's really an lost opportunity to broaden your thinking, broaden the way that you think about certain things and values that you hold. And it's taking away opportunities for someone else with a different lived experience to share what their perspective is. So, I think that when you can sit in that space and find it fun to really ask those questions, it can really be a great leadership tool. And then the last one, and I think it's one of the ones that's the most important, is to just do one kind thing for someone every day. I often joke that I don't like Dr. Phil. I don't like Dr. Phil. I would openly and publicly admit that. But I did hear him say many years ago that we should give away the thing that we need the most. And I thought that was probably one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard that man say, because it's true when you really think about it. If I'm feeling, down on myself, or, lonely, or any one of those emotions we may have, if I can do something kind for somebody else, that just makes me feel better. And it's not coming from a place of ego, like, oh, look at what I just did. It's really coming from a place of saying, I have the capacity to help somebody else be seen, feel heard, feel valued, feel part of a community. And I get to hold space for somebody else with no other reason than I just wanted to show kindness and empathy towards somebody else. And it's addictive. The scientific research shows that the parts of our brain that release dopamine just start firing like crazy. And so when we're the recipient of that, it's almost like, going like on TikTok for an hour, where if you've posted something on social media and you get a bunch of people who like it, you want to do it over and over and over again. You get a hit and a shot of that. And then so other people want to reciprocate it. And I think that really, not only for ourselves, but that's one of the fastest ways to grow a positive workplace culture, is when you can have that reciprocating, because then it happens within the organization and the people who are doing the work. It's not a management thing. It's not some sort of, magic potion that you come up with. It's really happening very organically, because people are learning how to treat people with humility, and they are bringing humanity back to the workplace.
Yeah. I can't agree more with that. Totally. I think, leaders are there to lead by example too, so that people will follow, what they're showing. So if you're not showing the humility, you're not being kind to others, you're not, using the right language so it's not upsetting people, then, the workplace is just going to follow what the leader is doing. And the same organization that I alluded to before, we had a manager, and every time he came into the office, it was like, oh my God, who's in trouble? It was because he didn't see him any other time unless somebody was in trouble or he had some complaint about something. So, he'd worked hard to get where he was in the organization, but yeah, he just wasn't liked by anyone else, because he was just so, to me, he was rude and he was brusque and he was, just total megalomaniac. But see him after hours, after he retired, he was a totally different person. And I couldn't believe that those two people actually existed in the same body.
And that's funny, because I think that, particularly for men, we all have personas and gender, I think biases that we take on. And I think that in the workplace, particularly for men, it has always been seen that if you show any sort of vulnerability, that's like this quote unquote soft skills. And I don't even like using that term, because they're not soft skills, they're essential skills. And I think that it has always been seen in, previous generations of senior executives, that if you show that level, it's like showing your underbelly as a dog, that, it's making you vulnerable for people to find fault in what you're doing, or to use that down the road against you. And when you look at it in that lens, I can understand why people wouldn't want to put themselves in that position. But I think that, the new style of leadership is demanding that leaders must show some of those, because that's what people in the workplace now require. We are evolving as human beings, and the workplace isn't the same that it was in the 40s and 50s. There were a lot of things that happened then that we would shudder if they happened now. And so, I think that our leadership style shouldn't evolve is ridiculous, and it's a requirement. I always say leaders aren't required to be vulnerable. Nobody is going to make you do that. But I think if you can find a way to share parts of yourself that don't feel too scary, and when you do that, you realize that nothing bad is going to happen, and actually people will have more respect and garnish more trust for you. It allows people of that generation, or who carry that type of leadership, to start maybe slowly, and kind of, like I say, meet them where they're at, to start to evolve their leadership style a little bit. Because I find often it's coming from a place of, what will people think of me if I adopt this new leadership approach? So that fear of judgment, or they've tried it before and it didn't go so well. So now the ego steps in to protect them, to say, nope, I'm not doing that anymore. The last time I shared something, that person used it against me and it came back and it bit me. So I'm not doing that anymore. It always makes me a little bit sad, not in a judgmental way, but in a way of like, I wish I could help this person see that there's a different path.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a great advocate for, everyone getting on, and men being vulnerable, showing their vulnerability, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. I think it shows that you're human. Yeah, Michele, it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation, so full of tips and ideas and strategies for us to follow as leaders, and how we can improve our leadership skills. Where can people find you if they'd like to learn more, or indeed work with you?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me, thank you for asking, Rose, is just my website. So I'm in Canada, so it ends in .ca. It's Curis Consulting, so it's CURIS consulting.ca. My social media links are there, but I don't use them very often. I joke and say I'm 51 years old, and I just feel like an old lady in a young person's space when I'm on there. But I do post time to time. But if you want to see anything new that I'm doing, or any course offerings, my website's just the best place to go to find everything that I'm doing.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Michele, if you were to offer some advice or some words of wisdom, what would that be?
I think that in order to be a good leader, you need to really kind of dedicate time to yourself every day. So I don't want to use the proverbial self-care. We used that a lot, but I think it's really important that we understand how we can meet our own needs in order for us to be able to hold space well and create safe containers for other people. So, for me, I think that would be a really important thing, is to if you don't already have one, try to see if you can establish a morning and a bedtime routine. I know for me, when I was able to do that, it was a complete game changer, and it impacted the way that I lead others in such a positive way that I can't tell enough people that, it's not the keys to the kingdom, but it's definitely a helpful piece of advice, I believe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's great words, and something that we should all endeavor to try out. There's that word, try.
I know. I still catch myself doing it. It's hard. It's part of the language, it's how we use the words in our language, and it's really difficult. I find sometimes it's easier to get a buddy and you can support each other.
That's it. Michele, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I've had an absolute joyful experience listening to you today. So, and I look forward to talking to you again really soon.
Thank you so much, Rose.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.